basic questions are, how does your faith flavor what you work, your scholarship? It doesn't necessarily make it better than someone else, but is there something that's characteristic of you and your faith that can flavor how you do your research, if you will? The values, your world perspectives that may account for that. A general meeting is where two people present for maybe 15 minutes. My hope is to have it be a wide spectrum of a discipline, because I think we find interesting experiences in that the faith is what's common, and then we can have a geophysicist and someone who's dealing with medieval pilgrimages to Holy Land, and actually there gets to be something that's very interesting, common dialogue and interesting aspects in that.
My work's all about, it's basically proving theorems, and I presented 2 times here. The first time, I was, so my work's sort of connected conceptually to problems in physics. At least one strand of my work is connected conceptually. So that gave me some leeway to think about kind of connections between mathematics and physics and sort of speculate, go into some philosophical speculation. But I still I don't think I've really got to the core of how my work, of how the work I actually do, kind of the practice of my work connected to my faith. So the second time I did it, a year later, I really I started thinking about what I do kind of every day, how that relates to my faith. And I told a colleague that I was doing this, and they said that they hoped it didn't relate to my faith because what I do is just maths, just proving things. But somehow in the practice of doing maths and the successes, the feeling when you successfully prove something, the feeling when you think you've proved something and you haven't successfully proved it, and just the kind of experiences you have when you look at this stuff. I found that kind of a very rich source of kind of interaction with my faith, and so I felt so I feel this has helped to me to see how my everyday practice as a researcher connects with my faith. And gradually, as I investigated further, it feels like these things are already there to uncover. It doesn't feel like I'm making it up. I think that was the kind of point I was on entailed, and they wrote, I chip away the bits of stone to reveal the lion. So I think that was that kind of gets across the combination of creativity and of kind of empirically revealing something that's already there.
But when you step back and look back at what you do you see it differently?
Yeah, well, I see it as not being. I suppose because I don't think about. I don't reflect. I don't make these reflections every second.
But now, I know. But now, when you think about it,
it feels like it has more. It has more of a purpose, and it has been more purposeful and less. It's nice to think that I've got something something more rich out of it than I otherwise had done, and that I've learned something from it, something more than about the subject itself that has been constructive for me and my personal development.
Thinking about God in quad, for me, talks about generosity. I think that will be the word that I will describe God in a quad. And generosity in different levels, like the generosity of the person that sits in this chair, or the people that sit in this chair and share their research.
Thinking about how my study related to my faith made me consider more how what I'm doing now is part of a trajectory of my life, which to me demonstrated a hopeful journey which I can only link to my faith. A second aspect of this different perspective maybe that God in the Quad offered in terms of my outlook on my studies was putting my own studies in contrast or alongside other people's studies, and this, though not in my own case, but in many people's cases, this worked particularly well when there are two people side by side sharing their experiences. Because when I think of the group of people who I'm with now and was with last term, people doing amazing work with older people, with medical science, pushing engineering and technological knowledge into new domains. It seemed there was a real shared ethics and a pattern of shared ethics, which again I can only explain through faith. That wasn't something I'd thought about previously.
One of the postgraduate students here. By training I'm a medic, but I'm doing research in clinical neuroscience. So the experience of presenting in God in the Quad was not an easy one for myself, because when I have to speak about non-scientific things which relate to faith and philosophy are not easy. But I think it was a fruitful experience, because I think I noticed that in the people with whom I shared my thoughts and my interests, my thoughts about life and what I do, they found it quite enriching and stimulating. Certain things are difficult to verbalize, but certainly what I'm doing at the moment and how my lives turn out to be, it clearly flows up out of the depth of the faith that I have. And being a doctor, it's obviously one should have vocation and serving other people and all that flows or is connected to it. And doing research also is, I think it flows out of that also, because it's a very practical application of what one can do and how to improve other people's well-being. And it is very difficult to sometimes talk about the connection between the work and faith in words, but I think sometimes in what we do in everyday life can be easier to explain the interaction between our faith and what we do.
My topic is the intergenerational relationships, and so it's for me it's really even the way I arrived to this topic is fruit of my faith. So I think where I struggle most presenting here is the language, because English is not my first language. But my research has deep roots in my faith. Yes, when we think about relationships and relationships among and between people of different generations, in fact, faith is what makes the difference in a relationship. Even in our daily life, the way we relate to each other is completely different if I have faith or
And perhaps the final thing I'd say about God in the Quad is that just the act of a group of people being together and talking about how faith relates to their lives brought a supportive and lovely group of people together.
for her, this was the most important activity of the entire year, because some way she reconciled herself with the beach and with the sea that take away her husband from her. So how can we? My question is always, that's why for me it was very important share here, because made me think about how can we transport from a faith experience to a scientific experience that also we can see, and we have a lot of indicators and dimension and criteria and variables to evaluate these programs, but how can we express that that is an experience, that is a feeling, a healing process? How can we translate to to a scientific way? And also, my research is in fact one of the topics that also the church has in mind. There is a group of social scientists that look at these issues of intergenerational questions, like in the workforce or